This is a rather important video to me, so I hope you enjoy. If you're anything like me, you like Star Wars. Arguably the most influential piece of recorded media to ever exist. Although its great impact, it's a story as old as time, told in a way never really seen before in cinema at the time. It's a hero's journey, from humble beginnings to ultimate triumph, shaped by trials, forced through sacrifice, and returning not only with glory, but with the wisdom to transform the world. But Star Wars builds up more than just a hero's journey, doesn't it? It's easy to tunnel vision the original trilogy, but Lucas's vision was much larger than just those three movies. The ultimate arc within Star Wars is that of the tragic hero, a corrupted chosen one. Carl Jung, if he ever watched Star Wars, would describe Anakin's dark side as the shadow, a representation of everything Anakin denies or hides. But more on that in a bit. In this video, I have challenged myself to fully articulate the power of the Star Wars story using my interpretation and the research of its creation and its philosophy. And my goal is to perhaps soften your harsh stance and maybe even give those silly prequels another shot. Let's jump into it. Humans are very contradictory creatures. We claim we want one thing, beg for it even, but end up loving and accepting nearly the opposite. In this case, we claim to want radically original storytelling, yet our most celebrated movie series of all time is a story so old and has been told so many times, it's nearly uncountable. The original trilogy is the archetypal monomyth, the hero's journey, from ordinary to extraordinary. But to make this more clear, let's go through the entire hero's journey. It starts with the departure, the call to adventure out of the ordinary. Meeting the mentor, a figure of wisdom, offers the hero help to face this new adventure. And finally, the hero crosses the threshold, leaving that old life behind and embracing that adventure, which then begins the initiation, which includes tests, allies, and enemies. Luke Skywalker finds himself deep within the rebellion, pursued by the Empire, and trained on Dagobah by Yoda. The initiation also includes the approach of the inmost cave. Luke literally enters a cave in his dream in Dagobah, revealing to him a potential disturbing future. This causes him to leave his training and go to Cloud City to save his friends. Finally, the hero's journey includes the return, which includes Luke returning to the Death Star to ultimately face the Emperor and his father, and also includes something called the resurrection. In this climactic duel, Luke resists the Emperor's temptation to join the dark side. Meanwhile, Vader ultimately chooses to save his son by destroying the Emperor, sacrificing himself in the process. So I want to talk more about the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker. The original trilogy portrays Darth Vader perfectly, a being of immense power, cold, hyper-intelligent, and kills without remorse. Every time he's on screen, he's the center of attention, and for good reason. After cinema's biggest reveal,
No, I am your father.
Upon first watch, the audience is left wondering how this reveal changes the story. At the point of release, audiences have only seen an evil Anakin. What the prequels fulfill is revealing the full extent of the tragedy, which only empowers the ending of Return of the Jedi. In Carl Jung's analytical psychology, the shadow represents the unconscious part of the psyche that contains our repressed fears, desires, instincts, and, quote, dark qualities we often refuse to acknowledge. The shadow, though, is not inherently evil. It's everything we deny or hide: aggression, ambition, lust, fear, grief, whatever. In the case of Anakin Skywalker, it's all of these things. But while the shadow itself isn't necessarily evil, if someone was to weaponize your shadow and all of those weaknesses against you, well, that would be pretty damn evil. Anakin's temptation to the dark side is a cacophony of unfortunate events. This includes the corruption of the Republic, the haughtiness of the Jedi Order, as well as Palpatine's temptations, lies, and corruptions. Palpatine is the personification of Anakin's shadow qualities projected outward. Everything Anakin fears and eventually embraces, becoming Darth Vader. So I've described the brilliance of Anakin's story, which is ultimately George's vision of Star Wars. But this is the story that society has forgotten. It's been smeared with rhetoric and hatred over graphics, dry dialogue, and performances. But I don't want to downplay Star Wars' flaws, because to do so would be unfair and would be rather foolish of me. So the most common complaints, right? The first one is George's dialogue, of course. There's already an incredibly well-made video on this called George Lucas, King of Wooden Dialogue. Highly suggest you watch that after this. But this is a comment that's often made towards the prequel trilogy. There are so many parts that you can easily point out as being ridiculous, goofy, or straight up wooden. This flaw, however, isn't unique to the first three movies, and in fact was a common complaint of the original trilogy by the older generations of that day. To discount the prequel trilogy because of dialogue, I believe, unfairly tunnel vision those movies, whereas the original trilogy gets a pass because of nostalgia. For every
I love you.
I know.
there's a,
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
and for every
I don't like sand.
there's a,
So this is how liberty dies. With thunderous applause.
another common complaint is an overuse of CGI. This is where I believe a true sect within the community begins. The use of CGI in the prequels was revolutionary at the time. Similarly to how the original trilogy revolutionized Hollywood, being kind of the first movie that people would return to theaters to watch multiple times, George once again revolutionized Hollywood by pushing the envelope on cinema technology, with the first ever fully CGI character, blue screen settings, and so much more. Things that are still being used in all the big blockbusters of today. 25 years later. That is undeniable, but ultimately the use of CGI falls to preference. In my experience, many of the older fans prefer the lightsaber fights, for example, of the original trilogy, because they're entirely acted out by real people in a duel, while the prequels mainly rely on CGI, which those scenes are mainly enjoyed by a younger audience. To further explore this, Star Wars is easily defined as a Republic era and the Empire era, the first three movies and the second three movies. During the Empire era, there are only two true warriors left, Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Mixed in with technical difficulties, lightsaber fights are slower and more methodical. While in the Republic era, there are thousands of Jedi and tens of thousands of years of Jedi training and history. It clearly differentiates itself with more acrobatic and faster-paced fighting. It was a deliberate choice to make that change because of the era the story is taking place in, and with CGI, more impressive stunts could be performed. I want to take the final part of this video to be rather honest. I grew up watching Star Wars, but it was the original trilogy. My parents didn't care for the prequels, so they didn't really encourage me to watch them. But upon first watch, mind you, I was very young at the time, I was mind blown at the graphics and these awesome fight scenes. Obviously, that's really all I cared about. But as I grew older, I gained access to the internet, of course, and I allowed myself to be influenced by creators who constantly bashed the prequels, hated on them, to the point where I decided I hated them too, as well as I hated everyone that worked on it. I hated the actors, I hated the CGI artists, and I hated George Lucas. It wasn't until around 5 years ago, when Season 7 of The Clone Wars was announced to be released, when I gave Star Wars another shot. I binged 6 seasons of The Clone Wars to catch up for that final season, and man, I've never had my mind radically changed on something like the prequel trilogy. Anakin's betrayal and Order 66 hold much heavier weight because of this television show. So I would say the biggest flaw with the prequels is that the story was too big for 3 movies. And this might upset a few people. In my personal opinion, the final 4 episodes of Star Wars The Clone Wars rivals the original trilogy in storytelling and surpasses it in action and visuals. And with the recent release of Andor Season 2, I couldn't be prouder to stand here before you as a Star Wars fan. So here we are. You've made it to the end of my little rant, and if there's one thing you should take away from this video, it's this. The innovator has for enemies all those who have done well under the old conditions, and lukewarm defenders in those who may do well under the new. I insist caution when hating on Star Wars. Its popularity garners so much attention that there are going to be loud voices, or even majority groupthink on many of its topics. So I challenge you to form your own thoughts around the themes and messages Star Wars is trying to portray. Machiavelli's quote speaks to the hesitancy on those who may support the new conditions due to fear of the paradigm shift or perhaps risks of ridicule. But I say speak up. Speak up, because the world has heard enough hate. And that's not just speaking towards the prequels, but the sequels too, as flawed as they are. Because the innovator, therefore, is caught between hostility and apathy, and they stand mostly alone, as George has for decades, and which caused him to sell Star Wars in the first place. So let's not make that mistake again, Star Wars fans, and be happy for what we've got. And thank you for watching.